To say that Volvo is doing well in the past few years would be quite the understatement, really, because ever since the Swedish car brand was acquired by Geely, it has been on a bull run, charting record sales growth in major automotive markets such as China, the US, as well as Europe. Volvo even said that it's growing faster than some of its rivals, and that is partly due to the strong demand for its luxurious new range of SUVs. Unsurprisingly, the Volvo XC60 is still the company's best-selling model globally, but it was this, the Volvo XC90, which got the ball rolling, and towering next to me is the XC90 facelift. Yes, boys and girls, the XC90 is already 5 years old, and I'm pretty sure you're not the only one having a hard time telling apart what's new and what's not. I'll save you the trouble. Visual changes are very subtle, with a tad more chrome on the lower front and rear bumper, and a new set of 20-inch alloy wheels, which of course can be upgraded to 21-inch or 22-inch items, as well as a brand new radiator grille. Really, it's new. The vertical slats are now fanged at the top and bottom, so it gives it a very nice three-dimensional look at certain angles, and I like the fact that Volvo chose to do this slight design change instead of blowing it up, you know, like what BMW is doing with the kidney grille. Other than that, I think there are no more design changes to go with the car. Don't fix what ain't broke, they say. It's the same story inside as well, with the same 7-seat theatre-style sitting position, which means passengers in the third row sit higher than those in the second row, and those in the second row sit higher than those in the front row. Understand what I mean? And specifically for the T8 models, T8 Inscription and Inscription Plus, they get this tailored instrument panel, which basically means a leather dashboard with contrast stitching. And I kind of like how it's built. It's soft to the touch as well, and the contrast stitching matches that on the door cards. Like before, Apple CarPlay is standard as well, and just hook it up to your phone and it pops up just like that. I kind of like how it's integrated into the 9-inch Sensors Connect touchscreen head unit, and taking just the bottom half of the screen so that you can still access various in-car features such as well, your sound experience, which I'll get to in a minute, and all the other safety and what have you not features that comes with the car. And for the first time, there is also Android Auto integrated into the head unit right there, and I think this is pretty much a very complete and modern head unit. You can also update the system via over-the-air updates, and as long as you're connected to a Wi-Fi. Okay, now let me talk about sound system. This top-of-the-line T8 Inscription Plus comes with Bowers & Wilkins sound system. This is the top-end, absolute most premium one you get in the car, and it has more speakers than the amount of speakers that are in my house and your house combined. There we're talking about 19 total speakers right here, and a lot of them are powered by a 1400-watt digital amplifier, as well as a subwoofer. And you're not going to find a subwoofer anywhere in this car because it's built into the D-pillars. That's right, guys, the guys from Bowers & Wilkins specifically built the sound system in this car together in the development process of the car, so I don't think you're gonna get any more bespoke than that. Now, I don't consider myself an audiophile by any standards, but this thing is crazy impressive, okay? The bass is rich and full, and the vocals sound super crisp and very clear. It's astonishing, and everybody who sat in this car with me, my family, my friends, and a friend of mine who is a singer-songwriter, they're all super impressed and super wowed by the sound system. And there's no fakery here, and if you're a true audiophile, you can even go into the sound settings right here and change your presets, go into the equalizer and do what you want to do. As for me, I'm just a newbie, so I just leave it in warm, so that's pretty much neutral, and enjoy it as it is. A word of advice, guys, get the Inscription Plus or regret later. Okay, as for the rest of things, nothing in this cabin actually feels quite out of place. So the cabin continues to use this open pore wood kind of thing, which feels expensive to the touch. And this R-Force crystal knob is actually new. I kind of like the less faceted design, and it still looks like an ornament in the car, and it lights up at night, so it's a beautiful thing. But I do wish, stuff like this would feel more premium because they could maybe add like a dampening system to make it flow with more fluidity. And speaking of fluidity, this guy doesn't quite feel as premium. And this plastic piece on the back, I mean, it could have been wrapped with leather, but just a tiny complaint there. Otherwise, it's the same old stuff in the cabin here, and in this case, old is gold. You still have this super huge panoramic glass roof, and 4-zone climate control is now standard across the board, including the T5 Momentum, and the T5 Momentum also gets the third row air vents, which is good. And there's a dedicated function here at the screen that lets you fold the headrest at the back so you can get a better view out. But unfortunately, speaking of the seats, all the second and third row seats are still manually powered, so you gotta get down to the nitty-gritty and do it yourself. So things can get a bit laborious and less elegant, but I think it is what it is. Speaking of rear space, well, as you can see, it's pretty much the same as before. There's no change in dimensions or whatever, and you get decent leg room when the seats are all the way slid back. But this is of course my driving position, and if you set it like this by default, you're not going to get a lot of rear space in the third row seats. It's maybe good enough for children, but you know, for longer individuals, you can always slide it up front, and you still get maybe like a knuckle or a fist worth of space for you to move around. And other than that, I think headroom is still great. You know, I like that the glass is big and just beautiful. As for boot space, it remains unchanged from before, and the T8 model gets a tire inflator kit as opposed to a space saver wheel. Now, let's go drive this thing. Okay, so if you've driven the pre-facelift XC90 plug-in hybrid, one of the earliest or most immediate things that you can tell about the plug-in hybrid system is the engine start-stop function. At the time, it was rough and you can always hear it come to life. But here, it is like a few steps ahead of its, you know, predecessor, so to speak, because they've ironed out all the imperfections, and right now it doesn't judder, it's not intrusive at all, and you can barely hear it come to life when the engine does come to life. Like when you're driving and the engine just springs to life, you don't hear it. And I think that is how all electrified powertrains should be. It still has the same engine from before, so right up front under the bonnet you get the 2-litre 4-cylinder twin-charged Drive E engine. Twin-charged is basically supercharged and turbocharged, and the engine makes 320 horsepower, 400 Newton meters of torque. So quite a healthy output from a small motor, but this is again augmented with an electric motor that's mounted on the rear axle. So again, not very typical plug-in hybrid stuff, a little bit more advanced, and the motor makes 87 horsepower and 240 Newton meters of torque. So if you're wondering what twin engine in the name means, it's basically, you know, married together, so you get the combined output of 407 horsepower and 640 Newton meters of torque. Now, unfortunately, we don't get the more powerful 420 horsepower Curse engine, and the only reason why we don't get that is because it's not made in right-hand drive version yet. So maybe sometime in the future we'll get that, but who knows. Okay, so normally with a highly boosted 2-litre 4-cylinder engine, you get slight turbo lag, but Volvo specifically tuned this engine to provide almost all the torque down low, so you've got assistance from the electric motor and the supercharger to get you going. So the net effect of that is there's no turbo lag when you're going off the line. Like for example, right here, I'm gonna stop. And then as soon as you gas the pedal, it picks up. And there's little to no turbo lag, especially when the engine is alive. So that is a good thing. And Volvo said this is deliberate because most XC90 owners are, you know, urbanites, and they drive in cities with lots of stop-go traffic. So with that in mind, I think in this regard, the XC90 is a perfect everyday car. So you've got plenty of usable power down low, but I find that the engine lacks a little bit of the upper mid-range pull that you typically get with a bigger CC car. That is the only drawback I can talk about or I can find with this powertrain. But other than that, it's very fast, it's really quick to accelerate, and more importantly, it's a very easy car to live with on a day-to-day basis. And what makes that even better is the fitment of a larger lithium-ion battery. So it's now 11.6 kilowatt hours compared to before, which was a 10.4 kilowatt hours. and Volvo says that it's going to give you up to 50 kilometers of range, but I think that is just the battery's capacity. Like, yeah, in real world use, technically you're going to get between 20 to 30s, close to 30s or a little bit more if you're lucky, but realistically between 20 to 30 kilometers of pure electric driving range is what you're going to get. And to get that charge is about 4 hours, so you can just plug it in overnight at your porch in your house, and that's only like 30 minutes longer than before, so not a bad thing. More importantly, the new XC90 comes with a new brake-by-wire system, which replaces the older, very disappointing braking system, because before this, you either have too much braking pressure applied or little to none at all. But with this, the biting point is spot on. It feels a lot more natural to modulate, and it almost feels like a normal, conventional powered car. And I would say almost as good as the BMW X5 plug-in hybrid. It's just that good. Also, there's less drag caused by regenerative braking, which is part of the reason why it feels more natural to begin with. I think Volvo has finally got it right. Now, I don't know if it's just me, but the transmission feels less clunky than before. It's still the same 8-speed automatic built by Aisin, but somehow gear shifts feel a little bit more buttery and less rubber bandy. Now, objectively, I think Volvo still has some ways to go when it comes to suspension tuning. This guy, it pretty much rides the same way as before, so very floaty when you're cruising on a highway, and that's understandable because, you know, the suspension has to attempt its level best to keep in check this SUV that weighs about 2.4 tons with a single driver on board. But beyond that, I think it is not the kind of car that you really want to take a lot of speed into the bends such as this. Take your time, otherwise, you know, suffer from nauseating body roll. But beyond that, I think if you take it over road humps at just the right speed, it soaks it up like a sponge. But if you go any faster, or if you take the car onto undulating surfaces, it becomes so busy. It's borderline crashy even. As for NVH, it actually feels quieter in here, and it seems like there's less rolling noise compared to before, even when rolling on the same Michelin Latitude Sport 3 tires. But high-frequency noises such as a buzzing motorbike can still be heard, and it's not isolated to its fullest. And when it rains, this glass roof can get a bit noisy lah. So I think those are just the two things that I can pick out in terms of NVH. And last but not least, guys, is safety. And honestly, Volvo continues to slay the game here with the crazy level of safety features lah. But you know, because they're Volvo and they've decided to up the ante. So blind spot monitoring system and city safety now comes with steer assist. So that just brings things up a notch and makes all the other cars in this price segment and SUVs feel so bad. So well done, Volvo. And I think that pretty much wraps up my driving impressions review. Let's do some closing thoughts. Alright, now, as it turns out, there is really more changes than meets the eye. And I absolutely love it when car makers go through the trouble to address some of the jarring issues that we pointed out a few years ago. At 410,000 ringgit, the T8 Inscription Plus offers fantastic value for money, and I'm not just talking about the Bowers and Wilkins sound system. There's been a great deal of thought that went into the makings of this vehicle, and you can really tell that from all the subtleties and all the nice things that are just rightly positioned in the car. So it's very purpose-built in that sense. However, it's not quite the perfect SUV yet, but as all things considered, I really think Volvo is pretty damn near perfection. So, what do you think of the XC90 T8? Let us know in the comment section below. Whether you like it or not, just leave a comment down there, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao!